Hello. Happy Tuesday evening. My name is Rose Davidson. I'm your host for Survivors TV, and welcome everyone. I hope you get some benefit out of today's broadcast. My guest today is Rik Schnabel. I think I've got that right. I always get it wrong. Yes, it is Schnabel, Rik Schnabel. Yes, and we're going to be talking about how to move from survive to thrive. Now, I had the opportunity to speak with Rik on a couple of other programs and podcasts that I do, and he's an exceptional gentleman who has a lot of information to share, and it's so useful, and I'm sure that he will share something of equal interest to you with you tonight, and you'll get heaps of benefit out of it. Rik was born to post-war immigrants who taught him the poverty cycle, and it would create a life of hardship, insecurity, violence, and drama caused by perpetual money issues. Until at 40, Rik untrained his brain and broke the cycle. He has turned untraining his clients' patterns and programs into a string of success stories. And since 2002, and with over 37,000 brain untraining hours, Rik has been helping average people to get beyond average by untraining their brain. He is also a best-selling author of 5 books, including The Power of Beliefs, 7 Beliefs That Will Change Your Life, The Secret of Creating a Life Beyond Limits, and Raw Courage, From Fear to Fearless, and The Life Coach Millionaires, and A Richer Way to Think. My God, he's just absolutely fabulous. And so, Rik, thank you so much for joining me today. It's an absolute pleasure to see you once again, and I look forward to hearing a little bit more about what you're going to be sharing with us.
Cool. Welcome, Rose. Welcome to your own show.
Yeah, welcome to my own show. Why not? Yeah, I've had the pleasure of speaking with you both on my podcast and on the Healing Through Love show. So we've got to know each other a little bit over the time. So and I know what you share is absolutely invaluable to anyone who is challenged with the poverty cycle that they think that they're living in, when in actual fact they can find wealth in lots of other ways.
Cool. I basically, something that I found, you mentioned the books that I'd written, and I was just thinking about a funny story. Like my very first coaching session, I remember, was to get over the fear of writing my very first book. And I'm so glad that I did that coaching session, because, of course, I had so many books in me and it just kept coming out constantly.
The plethora of information, that you should call it, I think. So, you through your life were subjected to a great deal of physical violence, between the ages of 4 to 17. And, that's the sort of age where everyone is quite vulnerable, especially up to the age of 7, when, their belief patterns are sort of cemented in place from birth to 7. And so those living through those, family violence or whatever kind of violence it is that you might be going through up until even your teen years, it cements you for later, doesn't it? If those beliefs sort of stick with you. Yeah. And it's really hard to break those belief cycles that really, the self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, the unworthiness, all those sorts of things. So, and it's just such a sad thing that, you were subjected to those things from your own family, as a child. No child should have to live in fear of their own parents. It's not right. And that's what this show is about, is for survivors of violence, whether it be domestic violence or childhood abuse of some type, to further their understanding about why it happened, why it may have happened to them, and strategies they can use to get past that. So you have had a very hard life, and you decided to break that cycle. So can you tell me how you went about doing that?
Well, the first thing is that, as you say, in the very early years of your life, the imprint period is from 0 to 7, so psychologically that's a period of time where we become pretty much who we're going to become for the rest of our lives. And you look at your parents, you look at adults, and you think that what they're sharing with you is logical, makes sense. They're the authorities, they're supposed to be the wise ones, and so forth. And it can get really quite difficult as a child, because you kind of thinking to yourself, what did I do wrong? And I think what often happens is the thing that you really need is to actually go out and aim to get some help. But what happens particularly when there's violence involved, you recede and you hide and you shrink and you lock yourself away. And that's what I literally did for most of my life. I took myself out of the social environments. I took myself away from people. I spent so much time in my bedroom alone, but it was safe there. And equally, public places like going to the library, I found a great deal of solace in the library. And when I was 7, I started to get bored with kids' books, and I started meandering through the library, and I found myself in the psychology section, and there was a book that I picked up, which is called "I'm Okay, You're Okay," and I started to read that, and I started to get a sense that you're not defined by your life now. You're not defined by your genes. You're not defined, by your past. And what happened as a result is I started to realize that you could actually get beyond it. Of course, it wasn't until I was much, much older, when I was 40 years old, that's when I really went along the path of getting rid of it. But of course, I had challenges with alcohol.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, until I was about, 56 or 57. I was a very heavy drinker. I turned to alcohol, and it was. My kids grew up just thinking I was a drunk, and I was drunk every night. So
yeah. But I can understand it, in the context of what you're really trying to do is you're really trying to shut your mind down. You don't want to think anymore. You don't want to obsess. And there's that nice feeling that you get just as the drinks start to take hold, and you go into that nice space. And it's a moment of niceness. So I understand how we can pretty quickly get addicted to that.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things that I really wanted to move beyond. I didn't want to go to AA or do anything like that, because I didn't want to declare that,
I was just a drunk. I wasn't an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Only alcoholics go to counselling, not drunks. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what I wanted to do was I actually wanted to get to a point in my life where I could have the odd drink and just have one. And I could never do that. And then what I ended up doing is I started exploring life coaching. So I studied life coaching, and it was fantastic. It was the first time in my life that I found home. It was kind of like language. All of a sudden, I had this language that helped me to express what was going on in my life.
Yeah.
And it helped me to understand myself. It also helped me to move through some of my patterns. But I remember there was a group of us that got along really, really well. And one of the group, an English lady called Sue, she said, "Oh, Rik, I've got these tickets, to learn about neuro-linguistic programming. Are you interested?"
Yeah.
And I said, "I'm in." And I could remember, going to this event, learning about neuro-linguistic programming, and watching this person who was sharing his story. And I thought to myself, oh my God, that's me. That's me. He was in a terrible position. He was $70,000 in debt. He was in a horrible, horrible place. But what he didn't know was I equally was in $70,000 debt. Plus I had a mortgage. Plus, I was down to my last $27, and I had just gotten married. We were about to have our first child, and I was seriously looking at homelessness, and I just thought, this is it. I've got to draw a line in the sand. I've got to do something serious. I've got to get rid of this problem. And I did, and I started to understand how to change my beliefs. I started to understand how to communicate better. I realized that, blame and shame and guilt and anger and sadness, all these emotions were keeping me there. And so what happened was I was in a very bad financial predicament. That was the first thing I wanted to break through. And I had this moment that I remember. I was in a sales job. I was the worst salesman in the entire company. And that's not just here in Australia. That's also America. I was worse than anyone in the American team, anyone in the Australian team. And I was about to lose my job. I just knew that. Even though they hadn't said, put me on notice, I just knew I was going to lose my job. And I remember I learned a lot about how to improve my level of communication, and not only with others, but with myself. And I remember sitting in my office and my phone rang, and I picked up the call, and that one phone call, I earned half a year's salary. And it just blew my mind. It just blew my mind. And I was studying with a crazy American guy as well, who was teaching me metaphysics and teaching me how to manifest and so forth. So I was learning all these things. And then I did it again. I sat down again in my office, and the phone rang again, and I earned another half a year's salary in that next phone call. And the difference was $1,000 between the first amount and the second. And I thought, that is really interesting. Why is the difference just $1,000? And I thought, maybe you're thinking, even though this is ideal, maybe even this ideal is limited. And I thought to myself, could I manifest twice as much? In my third phone call, I got another phone call, and I earned a whole year's salary in that third phone call. So 3 phone calls, and now I've got 2 years' income, and I've got 2 years' time. I could have just walked out that office. My agreement was done. I had met beyond my budgets. And all of a sudden, money just started coming from everywhere. And I began to realize how we limit ourselves, how we stop ourselves. And that was my first book, because I couldn't shut up about it. I wanted to share with everyone exactly how you do that. And it was a big change.
Yeah, I could relate to a lot of what you're saying. I mean, I didn't sort of get over myself until, I don't know, I was very late 50s. I gave up drinking, I gave up smoking, I gave up all those things. And, the things that I thought were keeping me happy and sane and or making me happy really weren't doing anything at all. Yeah, but it's lessons that we all need to learn, I guess, along the way, that the things that we use as crutches aren't necessarily the right things. And I don't know, I did a lot of soul searching since last year, since early 2020, and I've done a lot of inner work on myself, and so I've come out on top of all those things and behaviours that I used to have, the things that my children dislike me for. I could never take back their childhood at all. It's, what I did to them, I can't ever take back. I can't ever fix. It doesn't matter how much I say I'm sorry. I can't change anything. And, one of my kids doesn't really forgive me at all. We have a very strained relationship, and which really it hurts me a lot, but most of it is my fault. I know that, but I can't make up for that. The words I used to use to her when I thought I was actually teasing were actually quite hurtful. And in hindsight, it's hindsight's all very good, but you can't take those things back.
Yeah.
And, I did the best I could with what I knew. I didn't have any role models as growing up as a child. My parents, my mother was a weakling. My father was just a brute. And a sexual deviant. So, but anyway, that's life. And, sometimes I think that she just needs to get over it a little bit and forgive me, because I did the best I could do.
But here,
never asked for.
But here's the good thing, and this is the thing that I believe is massively valuable. You become an inspiration to your kids, actually, because they get the chance to see that contrast frame. They get the chance to see you when life wasn't going so well, and they now get the chance to see you when life is going well. And I think, one thing I've come to understand over the years, I grew up thinking I was a total screw up. I grew up, almost, thinking that I was the worst person in the world, that I was a moron, blah, 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 blah. I had lots of labels.
You and I could live parallel lives.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think the great thing about it is that what it does is it's you building your hero's journey. And I think what I love about, these sorts of things is that you see this in others. Like I've coached all sorts of people over the years now, and quite often I'll have my clients going, "Oh God, you must be thinking so poorly of me." And I say, no, not at all. If I judge you right now, I hold you in that space. And the thing is that as your coach, I don't want to hold you in that space, because the whole reason you're here is you want to be liberated. You want to move on from that space.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that what's great about it is it becomes empathy. People understand you. People really get you. And I think if my life was, fantastic, if I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, then a lot of my clients really wouldn't relate to me. And I don't think I'd relate to them either.
No, I don't think. People say, Rose, how come you've turned out to be such a nice person? Why have you got such a great heart? Why are you always giving to others and never take anything for yourself? And I think, well, I don't know why I grew up just the way I am, and I think others deserve more than I ever received. So I'd rather just give what I can of myself to others, because some people just need that little bit of help. I just I don't know. That's why I do what I do. That's why I have Survivors TV. That's why I have the Healing Through Love show, because I want to help people understand that they're not useless and they're not a waste of space. And what's happened to them is not their fault, and it's happened for them. It's not really happened to them, because life has a way of throwing challenges up to each of us, I think, and it's how we handle those challenges through life that brings us to the place where we are happy and we can say that we can look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I love you. I think you're a wonderful person. You've done what you can. You've done the best you can. And, you just need to forgive yourself.
Yeah, I think forgiveness plays a very, very big part. I remember going through my training, and I remember there was one particular module, which was, we were all going to graduate as coaches, as, people getting out there helping people. And I remember my trainer said, it's now time to forgive yourself. It's now time to, you've forgiven lots of other people, but now it's time to actually forgive yourself. And I remember that was so liberating. I remember the process was, it's actually called a forgiveness process. And the process is that you put all these people on a stage, and you go through your primary school friends and your high school friends and any uni friends and et cetera. And all these people come on a stage, and you go through this formal process of forgiving them and allowing them to forgive you as well. And I remember that particular process. It was so easy to just let the tears roll down your face as you went through this very cathartic process. But the fascinating thing is, I remember there was this one particular gentleman who I got into business with. He was my very first introduction to a sociopath. Like I had the bullies at school, and I thought I'd gotten rid of them at school, and they showed up in my career. And, and it was an intellectual, game of fisticuffs that, used to go on. And I remember this particular guy, it took 7 years to grow this business, and he stole it out from under me, and he tore it to shreds. And I was very resentful. I was a very angry guy. And I got to this point where, through this forgiveness process, where I just went, you know what? It's just not even useful thinking about him, let alone, resenting it. And I remember completely forgiving him too. And the feeling for me was an incredible amount of elation. And I ended up going down a very specific spiritual journey from there, and worked with spiritual coaches and lots of people helping me, to grow. And the thing that I found was I started to make sense of the world, and I started to make sense of my life, to the degree that I began to realize that my life was actually perfectly designed. It couldn't have been better. I had parents who were real challenged in a poverty way, very angry parents. And so that taught me peace, because I didn't want to turn out exactly like they turned out. And I didn't want to be in the financial situation that they were in. So they taught me wealth. They taught me peace. And equally, my ex-business partner taught me forgiveness. And I began to realize that a spiritual ascension is a context of letting go of things. You eventually get to a point that you let go of competition. You let go of winning. You let go of striving. You let go of that constant fight that people put themselves into, and all of a sudden life becomes incredibly peaceful. So, over the years I've been, we now teach coaches, we now teach neuro-linguistic programming to people. And I say to my students, the worse your life has been, the better. Because in fact, you're going to create a great story out there that's going to really inspire people. People are going to see the contrast. They're going to see where you came from, where you are today. And it's going to make such a big difference. And I think it's that courage, it's that clarity, it's that opportunity to get beyond your problems that does become quite inspirational. So, I now know that my life was actually quite perfect, even though I grew up thinking it was imperfect.
Yeah. I've got a Marianne asked, she would love to know the healing process. So, help with stuck grief. Do we want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of a particular process that I've had done on me quite a lot, and I use this with my clients a lot. The process is specifically called timeline.
Yeah.
And it's something that's taught through neuro-linguistic programming. Quite quickly, in a summary, what it actually does is, you're familiar with it, Rose, but maybe, Marianne might not be. But essentially, what you do is you revisit your past. So you create what is called a dissociation. So the moment that you rise up above yourself and you see yourself, that's what we call a dissociation. In a disassociated state, you can actually look at yourself without feeling the emotion attached. And it creates an opportunity to be able to look at problems from a multidimensional level. In other words, I think that problems I've come to discover now, problems are mathematical. They really are. It's kind of like bad parents, bad child. It's that simple. But you put bad parents, bad child, great coach, great mentor, and you can nullify the bad situation in some sense. So most problems are very linear. This happens and this happens and this happens and this happens. And of course we go, yes, of course I think like this. Of course I should be angry. Of course I should be, guilty, frustrated, whatever the emotion might be. But if you start looking at problems in a multidimensional way, for example, from another perspective, you can disassociate yourself to the degree that you can buy into the wisdom. Actually, let me give you a classic example. There was a lady that came to see me. The problem was very simple. Well, it seemed simple. She couldn't play piano. That is, she could play piano. She just couldn't bring herself to sit at the piano and play the keys. And I came to discover, looking at the formula, it was really simple. Eager, enthusiastic student who wanted to learn how to play piano finds a music teacher that is a little bit narcissistic. This music teacher starts creating an association, a negative association with music. In other words, whenever she hit the wrong note, she would hit her on the hand with a ruler. And the worst thing that she would do to her students when she got really frustrated with them was she would cut their fingernails right down, so when they played on the keys, it actually hurt. And, you know, I can't even imagine what sort of person does that, but this was the example with this client. So she couldn't play the piano as a result. And she had seen numerous therapists. She had, you know, done so many different things to try to get herself back on the piano. But what it was an association problem. She had an association with music which was negative. So she was also very religious. She believed in the concept of God. Now, I'm not going to say that I believe in God or whatever. Let's call it universe to keep it nice and neutral. So basically, I then said to her, I said, I want you to close your eyes. So she closed her eyes. And I said, I want you to rise up above yourself, see yourself at the piano, not being able to play. And she could see that. So now she's disassociated. So I said, there's someone next to you right now who is very special. This someone who is next to you is someone you admire hugely. In fact, it would be the ultimate person. And immediately I could see a tear roll down her face. She got it. And she said, it's God, isn't it? And I said, it is. And I said, I want you now to look through God's eyes. And I want you to imagine what God is thinking as he looks at you with all that talent and ability not being able to play piano. And then so that's a dissociation pattern. And so what I then said is, I said, now what I want you to get a sense of, if there was a song that God wanted to play through you, what would that song be? What would that musical piece be? Would it start in E? Would it start in D? Would it start in C? Where would you begin? What would be the most likely key that God would start? And she just said D, bright. It's got to be bright. So she imagined herself playing D. And so I got her to now imagine herself playing as if God was, you know, transmitting a piece of music through her and onto piano. We finished the coaching session. She immediately went to the piano and she started to play. And it was the first time that she played, and she said she just sat there and played and cried her eyes out on the piano. But the process there is essentially, is if we look at problems from a multidimensional perspective, we can start to get beyond the problems themselves. Because when we look from our own perspective, we remember the pain, we remember the experiences, we have the labels, the stories, the words, the feelings, all the submodalities and associations of that event. So if we look at problems from a multidimensional focus, we can start to see them differently. For example, the way that I see a lot of my problems in the past is I see that my entire purpose, my entire life has actually been committed to the work that I've now been doing for almost 20 years. You know, it was like that first 40 years was really preparing me for the next 20. And so as a result of that, as I now move into my 60th birthday, the thing that I realize is that my life actually has been quite perfect, and I am here to help people, and you think about it, what you're doing, Rose. I mean, because of your upbringing, because of what happened, you're now doing this show. And as a result of this show, it is now getting to people who need you, people who need to hear from you, people who need to hear from the people you invite on the show. So it actually has a perfect purpose.
Yes, that's what I was told.
There's someone calling you right now.
Go away. It's my birthday. My kids are ringing me. So.
Oh, happy birthday. You didn't tell me it was your birthday.
Oh, because. Anyway, yeah, you're right. Life doesn't happen to you. It happens for you. There is a reason, and you can't see the reason why you're being bashed up or, raped, or, you can't see why these bad things have happened to you. But if you look at them further on down the track, they're there to teach you a lesson. It's God's way, universe's way, whoever you think, it's their way of saying that you are on a path. You just need to learn the lessons along the way. And when you've learned a lesson, then they'll, thank you, Marianne. They'll give you another lesson and another lesson. And if you haven't learned anything from the lessons that life has dealt you, then you'll just keep repeating that until you've learned what the lesson is supposed to be teaching you. And it will just keep going on. So if you allow and don't learn, then it's you have to just listen, and you have to listen to your heart. You have to do the inner work. You've got to get rid of the shadows. That's the only way you can feel anything, is just get rid of those shadows.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a spiritual person as in God. I don't believe in there being a God or a anything. It's just the universe to me. And there are guides, guardians, angels that look after us. That's what I believe. And, but I don't make everyone else believe. But that's what I believe. That the universe has put us here. We've lived several lives before. We've put back on this earth because we haven't learnt the lessons we were supposed to have learned in a past life. So we put back in this lifetime to learn lessons and then move on. And when in the next life, hopefully your life will be better because you've learnt the lessons you were sent here to learn in the first place, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, look, I completely agree with you. I really do believe that is what is the truth. But even if it isn't, it's a real convenient truth. It's a truth that makes you understand what is going on and why your life is like it is, and why it was like it is. But one thing that I think is really motivates you in that context is, I think every single book I write is another piece of information that you've experienced through your life. In the self-help sort of genre, it's that typical format of, here is the problem, here is what my problem was, or here is the problem, and this is the process, and that is the solution, or that's the outcome. And so it's great because every single thing you write and everything you do, in podcasts, on YouTubes, on radio, whatever, is leaving a trail. It's leaving a trail of clues for those people who just aren't there yet, so that they can begin to ask the question, what's the next step for me? What's the first thing that I need to do? Because the world is confusing these days. There is so much information. There are so many breadcrumbs. You could certainly end up at grandma's house, or you could end up at the wolf's house, and you've really got to be able to find the lot of breadcrumbs that take you ultimately to your ultimate destiny. And you're going to get there anyway, be it in this lifetime or perhaps in the next, if you believe in, past lives and so forth. But, it's really about knowing what's the first step. And the great thing that I've seen, over the years, I've trained so many people who are speakers now and authors and coaches and all sorts of people, that, at first they were all very confused students sitting in your room going, how do you master this? How do you learn this? It's okay. Just learn, go through the steps, but work on your own healing first so that you really build your own story. And once you build your own story, now you can go out and inspire people who will be the people that you will help. And then they will then move on to their lives and they will go out and inspire their people. And
it's like a rolling stone, isn't it? You help one person, you will hope that that person will pay that kindness forward, and it just keeps going and perpetuating until, that is my hope, that if I can help just one person, then I've helped a whole world, because I am hoping that the person that I helped will use whatever kindness that I've shown them and pass that on to somebody else, and they may do without even knowing it. It's a lovely thought, and it makes me all feel all nice and warm, and I hope that's how the world will become. I think we need a lot more of all this rolling stones with gathering moss. I think
it's one of the things that I used to think about this years ago when I first started as a life coach trainer. I used to think to myself, am I really doing any good here? There might be 20, 30 people in front of you. You're teaching a group of people and you're thinking, am I really doing any good here? But one thing I assure you is further down the track, I now see, students that I've taught years ago that are putting posts on Facebook, writing books, getting up on stages, creating their own podcast shows or being on shows. And it makes you feel good to think that it was worth all that time, energy, and investment in helping people, because now they're helping people.
Yep.
And I think if we constantly are encouraging even the younger people to start coming through and learning from the wisdom of us older people, then what happens as a result is it just keeps building. The world will be very different. 100 years from now, the world will be very, very different. As a result of all the work that people like yourself and others have done, the world will be very different.
Yeah, but there is there's a shift happening in the vibration of the planet at the moment, and it's becoming a more advocating for peace and love and harmony. And I think, the times, because of what's happened through this whole pandemic, I think the world is seen that they don't need all this other horrible stuff, that we've seen countries come together to help each other when they may have been enemies in the past, so why can't we just continue on with that? Why does it take a pandemic to bring the world together? It's bizarre, but it's obviously happened for a reason, so that we can change the vibration of the planet and lift it up so that everyone's on a better plane of happiness and peace.
Well, I think, if we think about sort of where things are at the moment, I think people are certainly more giving than they've ever been. A few weeks ago, we lost one of our dogs, and, many, many years ago, people would say, oh, it's just a dog, get over it, suck it up, etc., etc. I've never seen suck it up as a great strategy for healing. But now the amount of people that reached out to us, the amount of people that said, I really get what you're feeling. I really get, that they are very special members of the family, and we're so much more respectful now than ever before of one another.
Yeah, we are.
Which is a great sign, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. I do believe so. Anyway, Marianne's, her mum passed away in 1985, and she's still carrying a lot of emotion from losing her mum. Now, I'm not quite sure how old Marianne was when her mum passed, but is there something that, maybe we could, the timeline therapy, I mean, I know that it's sort of not ideal over Zoom or over online, but, maybe there's some practice that you might be able to help her with, that she could help herself with.
I think there's a lot of focus, a lot of things you can focus on in passing on. I I teach my students, my life coach students, when it comes to grief, I usually say to them, let people go through their journey. And the grief process can sometimes go for 2-3 years, in this case with Marianne, 1985, that was a long time ago. So, it's, like Marianne is saying that I have emotion, but Marianne, actually, if you could be a little bit more specific, if you could think about the emotion that you have, because, I lost my mother, I lost my father not so long ago. I still have emotion, that is, I still think of them and I still have emotion, but it's not problematic emotion. It's not debilitating emotion. It doesn't stop me. It's not slowing me down. It's not having me in a grieving process or a fetal position. But Marianne, is this emotion really bad? Like, is it stopping you in any particular way? Or is it just still that emotion?
Yeah, is it still raw and hurting, or is it just because you miss your mum and it's she cries easily, I can't talk about it, affects my heart, gives me palpitations?
Yeah, okay. So the first thing, Marianne, is that, losing someone that you were very connected to, it certainly makes logical sense. That, not that emotions make any logical sense, but it makes logical sense that you could be triggered. And when you say I cry easily, what I'm referring to is triggering. It means that something that you share or something that you hear or something that you see triggers that. So what that actually is that is something within your memory that is triggering that particular emotion. And so you were saying that, this was when you were 16 and that you're crying now about it. So one of the things that is really important, I think, is to, depending upon what is your perspective. For example, I remember seeing a lady who was probably the second lady that I knew in my life that I really cared about that passed on. And I could remember going to the service, at her funeral. And there was something that he was an Irish priest. And he got up and he said, because there were a lot of us in tears. And he got up and he said, the first thing I want you to understand is those tears are for you. Those tears are for your loss. Those tears are the feelings that you feel. But what I want to say is she is in a much better place. And she is free and she is in a much, much better place. So when we look at that from a religious context, what that actually is telling us, if you believe that, what it does is it calms us to some degree, because sometimes we've got to find the actual source of those tears. And in some cases, the source of those tears is that you think they're still hurting, or you think they're still in pain, or you think they are completely gone, lost, whatever is your belief system that puts all that together in your mind. Now, actually, I'm just going to read. I feel I'm here for a reason, synchronicity, any death. I cry, but I can't remember my mum's funeral. My dad passed over 10 years ago, but I'm okay with that. So it says to me that you probably had a much deeper level connection with your mother. Not that you didn't have a deep connection with your father, but there must have been some, almost sisterly connection that you had with your mother. And perhaps you feel like, that now is a disconnection. But the thing that I really love about a spiritual perspective, I remember Wayne Dyer was saying, there's always a spiritual solution to every problem. And what he was referring to was the fact that when we embrace a spiritual perspective, we can start to come to terms with that it's just a veil. That's all it is. It's just a veil. They're still there. That you're actually still connected. And I'll share a quick story with you. This was my first piece of evidence, let's call it proof of life in the afterlife. And I was going out with a girl for many, many years. I got along with her mother really well. Her mother passed away. She had an aneurysm. And we were very close. I really cared for her. And I went, it was my very first experience of losing someone close. And I went into grief, and my grief went into shutdown. So I just wasn't functioning. You know, even though I was showing up for work and doing that, I still wasn't really functioning. And I remember going to see a clairvoyant. And this clairvoyant said to me, she said, "Oh my God, I cannot do a reading for you." And I said, "Why is that?" She said, "There is this woman interfering, just constantly wanting to get a message to you." And she said, "Did someone pass recently?" And I said, "Yeah, someone did." And she said, "Was she a short little lady?" And I said, "Yes, she was." And she said, "She's pushing you in the back." And anyway, this kind of made sense, I guess. And she said, "She's pushing you in the back. She's saying, you've got to get on with your life. You're here for a bigger reason. Get off your butt and get out there and live your destiny, live your purpose." Now, this is way before I even got into the coaching space and the training space. But there was an interesting thing. I was in Western Australia at one point in my life, and that's where I met my girlfriend and her mother. And I was moving back to Melbourne at the time. And I said to her, I said, "Look, I'm going to be away from here I might not ever come back. Is there anything you want some help with?" And she said, "Actually, there is. There's these 2 palm trees, small palm trees. Could you dig them out and then put them on the other side of the fence?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I dug out these trees, put them on the other side of the fence. And she said to me, she said, "Now remember, you always have to keep their feet wet." And I said, "What does that mean specifically?" "I think I know what it means, but what does it mean?" She said, "You've always got to keep their roots wet." In Western Australia, it's just sand everywhere. And so I did that. And this was my proof of life. In the clairvoyance, this lady, this entity on the other side, her name was Dot, by the way, Dorothy or Dot. And she said, the clairvoyant finally said, that's all she wants to say. Just get on with your life. Oh, she said one more thing she wants to say. And then she said, "Thank you for keeping their feet wet." And that to me was kind of like proof of life. And I remember another time I was doing a training, and there was a lady who was a medium who was in the course. And we got to the very end of the course, and she was still sitting, you know, with big saucepan eyes at the very back of the room. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "There's someone trying to get messages to me for you." And I said, "It's my sister, isn't it?" And she said, "Yes, it is." And she said, "Do you want to speak to her?" And, you know, years ago, by the way, I used to think this was all BS. This just was crap. But now I'm an absolute believer. And I spoke to my sister in the afterlife, and it couldn't have been anyone else. It was definitely my sister. And I asked her, she had cancer, and I said, "Did you have to die?" And she said it was like I just let myself go. And she said it was like I was going backwards downstairs. And then she said I got to one step, and this is my sister's words, and that last step was a doozy. And I just couldn't get up. I couldn't get the energy to get my life back. And, of course, I passed on. And the thing that I really got from that is it gave me a completely different level of death. It made me no longer believe in death. And I do not believe in death. I don't believe we die. I think it's a myth. I believe that the soul lives on. And the thing that's so important is that when we do die, we let go of all the ailments, problems, issues. But our soul captures this lifetime and every other lifetime, and it carries data with it. So, you know, that in essence is essentially the wisdom that we grow. You know, and wisdom in my view is not intellectualism, but it's intellectuality applied. And that's wisdom. Yeah, 110% believe. So the thing is, Marianne, don't think that it's a loss, because a loss is a myth. It really, really is. You haven't lost anything. You are actually still so connected. And the thing is that the people that you lose can connect and help you in this life, but you disallow it by extending the grieving process, because what you're not doing is you're not letting them help you. Sometimes I'm standing up in a room, or these days with COVID, on Zoom teaching my students, and I get incredible wisdom that comes through, but it's not me.
Yeah.
It's coming from
somewhere. There's this, I get the same. I get all this goosebumps, and when I know that I've said something really profound, I think, oh my God, where did that come from? And, it hasn't come from me. Someone's like filtered it down, and it's just come out of my mouth.
Absolutely. So I guess, Marianne, it's what I'm aiming to kind of get you to perhaps try on is I'd love to do a process with you, but we just don't have the time. But philosophically, I can help you to kind of move on from that. And that is that what you can actually do is, if you can start to recognize that death is actually to be rejoiced, not to grieve. Not to let it go. I was working with a medium the other day for my dog. My dog was talking to me through this particular
celebrate
meeting.
Their life and not grieve their death. I think
absolutely.
It's the people say, dancing on a grave is, in bad taste, but it's not, because you should be celebrating the life that you had with that particular person, and leave them, let them go, to where they need to be, and don't keep holding them back on the earth, because maybe they're not meant to be here. They're meant to be where they need to be, and you can connect with them anytime. All you can do is sit quietly and ask, and they will come. It's God's truth. It's the universe's truth, because in this house, my stepfather died in this house. I actually sleep in the same room as where he passed. And I know he's still in this house. He gave up smoking, but when he wants to tell me something, this room where I'm sitting in my office, it just fills with cigarette smoke and petrol fumes, because he used to be a mechanic. So I know that he's here in this house somewhere. He's got a message for me, and I just need to sit quietly and listen. And, this is where sometimes the words come out of my mouth that I think, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah, absolutely. My mother was a smoker, and I really dislike smoke, but I can smell it. Yeah, I can smell it, and I know that when I smell it, that's my mother. Equally, my sister, my older sister, was a great cook. Mind you, my younger sister's probably spitting at me right now because she was a great cook too. But when my older sister's around me, I can smell great Italian cooking, even though she wasn't Italian, but she was a great Italian cook. And so, really rejoice, Marianne, really allow yourself to get yourself to a point where you can, the best thing that you can do for your mum is actually be the best person that you can be in this lifetime. That's the best thing you can do for your mum.
Yep.
And if you decide to be that person, live your fullest life, live your destiny, live what you've been put here for. Like, I'm technically 5 years away from retirement, technically,
Yeah, I'm technically 5 too.
Yeah. Are you? Oh, so this is your 60th?
62nd.
This is your 62nd?
Yes.
Wow, you don't look 62. Good work. Good work. I'm about to, I don't know, what are we, the 14th? So that's about, in 15 days, I'm 60.
Oh, wow.
So, but the thing is, this, Marianne, I guess, is what you've got to get your brain to do is polarize it. The reason that you're having grief is because you're still allowing the stories to continue through your brain, through your heart, through your life. And when you start to get a more spiritual perspective on it, and it sounds very much like you're there.
Woo-woo. It sounds woo-woo, but it's not. It's actual fact.
Yeah, but it sounds like Marianne's certainly in that space as well. So let that help you. Let that work for you. And then it starts to polarize the idea. The brain is just like a computer. It really, really is. It works in zeros and ones, yeses and nos. And so what we have to do is we have to go, okay, so where are we thinking? I'm thinking that I'm at a loss. Well, the opposite of that is maybe a 1. I think I'm at a gain. And so you've got to get your brain to move to the gain point, so that you can start to rationalize and get that your mum's passing actually creates a deeper level conduit, that you can fully connect. And the truth is, I don't believe we work alone. I really believe we work in packs, and I think there are many, many guides, guardians, angels, call them what you will, all working with us, helping us to do the best work that we can. And maybe your mum is part of your team. Who knows?
Maybe. Anyway, Rik, we're going to have to leave it there. Is there some way that people can reach out to you if they want to, find out a bit more about, what you do and how you can help them?
Yeah, look, probably the best place would be lifebeyondlimits.com.au. So
can I put your email address down? Would that be all right?
You can, yeah, absolutely. Feel free. You can email me too, and I promise I will answer you. I do get a lot of emails, but I answer every single one, so I will definitely answer you. There's also some free resources on Life Beyond Limits, and there might be something there that really helps you.
Yeah, I'm hoping that you can come to some peace, Marianne. I think after all this time, you actually do need to have it, and and let your mum go. I think it's time.
Yeah, absolutely. I really hope, Marianne, that some of this has really helped in some way too.
So do I. Anyway, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Rik, you've been an absolute pleasure yet again to speak with. I'm so glad that you're in my proximity. So, I'll be here next week with another wonderful guest on Survivors TV. I will see you next Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Good night, everyone.
Bye.